Hello, 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 and welcome to the Compassionate Cultures podcast. My name is Sipho Ndlovu, and I am a facilitator and trainer for Strawberry Words. And I am here as a guest podcast host. Really looking forward to today's conversation and guest. I'm not here by myself. I am with the legend now and also the upcoming legend because yeah, there's a lot developing and evolving, and I'm really looking forward to digging into a conversation with Daniel Stone. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, and good evening. Good evening.
Listen, yeah, thank you so much, again for joining us. So I've known of you, before I
Mm,
knew you. As word usually does get around when an interesting individual is doing the bits
mm,
and doing the work, and especially within the community. And I know
mm,
that that's something that means a lot to you.
mm,
And so many people were sort of pushing me in your direction,
mm,
and to figure out what it is that you do. And once I sort of came to one of your events, and I've
mm.
seen you on the mic performing poetry as well. There's layers to you.
What is late, isn't it?
And just being able to experience your mind, your heart, and your work.
Mm,
What it left me with was questions.
yeah, yeah,
I'm bringing those questions here. How are you feeling today? Are you looking forward to today's conversation?
yeah. Yes, yeah, very much so. And likewise, like you're also somebody who I met and came across. I remember, I think, a number of different events, either where you were hosting or doing things, and yeah, seemed to be doing some really interesting work. And almost that's one of the things I love about Birmingham as a place,
Mhm.
where it does feel, especially if you're involved in certain forms of conversational spaces, that you do then kind of see people. So I'm definitely glad that we've kind of in the past had opportunities to have informal conversations, and now we can, I guess, have a more public opportunity to explore some
Mhm.
important topics. So yeah, they're definitely looking forward to the conversation, and definitely just the ongoing journey of discovering and sharing wisdom and helping to build knowledge and community.
Amazing. And just to start there, actually, I've said a little bit about how I've come across you and your work. But my first question, and to people who will be listening, who is Daniel Stone? How do you introduce yourself?
And actually, so the funny thing is, I actually do have a definition of Daniel Stone,
A
which is a funny thing.
definition. We love it.
It is a funny thing where I think it was a few years ago now, where I had a period of time where I was kind of in between jobs. So I finished one job at the University of Birmingham, was about to start a new job as a civil servant, and then was fortunate to have a few months in between. So I decided to kind of go off grid a bit, deleted WhatsApp, only sent my family postcards to let them know it was okay. So I remember during that period using that as a time to really do a lot of deep thinking about myself and about the sort of person I was and wanted to be
Mm,
moving forward. And so one of the questions I asked myself was who is Daniel Stone, and if you were to see Daniel Stone like in a dictionary, like
mm,
what might you see? And so I kind of had that as an exercise that I did at the time. And then when I returned back to the UK, I kind of had a practice of having these affirmations and these things that I would repeat almost on a like daily basis. And so one of the things that I do say, I start my day by saying, "Good morning, Daniel," and then this definition, which is then Daniel Stone, a human being composed of a contemplative intellect, a male British Afro Caribbean body, and an enduring spirit. And then I go on to say a few other things.
wow.
Um, and so I guess in thinking about those elements of what I chose in that initial bit of, who is Daniel, I think definitely that sense of, that first bit, that contemplative intellect, that sense of, and one of the kind of discussions we had in one of the past philosophy events was about consciousness and what is consciousness and who are we as individuals. And so it feels that, so much of myself, my experience of life is kind of bound up in what some people call consciousness or intellect. In that sense, not just in terms of what happens in our brains, but also what happens in our hearts, our souls, our being.
Right.
That then is who we are. And so for me, it was important to kind of begin with that framing, that sense of yeah, who we are as individuals is so much kind of bound up in our consciousness, in our appearance, in our experience of life, in how we choose to process things in our own mind and hearts. I then kind of laid onto that the idea of then, you know, up on top of that is this physical body that
Mhm.
I've been given, which is male, which is of Jamaican heritage, which is also born in Birmingham in England. So all of those things then have helped to shape and define who Daniel then has been as he's grown up, as he's been socialized into the world, as he's experienced different parts of life. But then bringing it back then to that sense of Daniel also being this eternal spirit that in my mind will go beyond kind of once this physical body is gone as well. So I think all those things really help me to grab, and especially when I start my days, like saying that to myself, it helps to kind of ground me and remind me of those things that are important to the
Yeah.
essence of who I am, and also speaks to, I think, a lot of the values that probably shape the way that I see the world and interact with the world as well.
My goodness. Well, good evening, Daniel. Um, that's incredible. A dictionary definition of Daniel as well. Like the alliteration even, yeah, actually works there. It's incredible. Can I actually ask, what was it that you studied at university, and where did you go to university as well, actually?
Yeah. So I studied economics and management at Oxford University. So actually economics, I guess, isn't particularly linked to philosophy as a subject, but I think probably points to the fact that I've always been somebody who's enjoyed just like learning and asking questions about the world and myself. So I remember that even when I was young, I just really enjoyed being in educational environments. So I guess people always had that story of, you know, their first day at nursery and, you know, some people were like holding onto their parents' legs, but I was literally straight in, apparently, we're just straight in and getting onto things. So that's something I've always enjoyed learning, reading, inquiring about the world. And so that was really the kind of starting point for me then wanting to both ask political questions. So kind of
Mhm.
I grew up in Handsworth, and so very much was asking questions around why are there these sorts of issues that we're seeing on a daily basis, and how can we begin to address some of them. But then also kind of me just wanting to also excel in terms of things that I was doing at school.
Mm.
So I remember actually kind of finding economics when I read a book called Capitalism and Slavery by Eric Williams, which was the first time that I'd heard about economics as a subject. I think prior to that, I knew that I enjoyed maths. I knew that I was quite physically minded. But I
Mhm.
remembered reading this book that was explaining almost some of the monetary reasons behind why slavery both started, but then also then why it started to kind of dwindle before its kind of eventual end. And so I remember then that book just giving me language that I just had never really heard about before.
Mm.
And just
Wow.
becoming really excited at having found that particular subject. So and I think that's kind of what's taken me throughout my whole career in life. I think that real thirst for knowledge, for learning, to really just to be able to learn more about myself and inquire more about the world around me.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And the reason I was asking about where you studied and what you studied as well was I guess everything that you were talking about was reflecting your idea of consciousness and how you were presenting that. So I was like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
I wonder what he studied. And then you say economics. I'm like, oh,
Not
you
even close.
but that says a lot about your own self-reflection and that power and your drive to learn as well. Um,
Yeah,
so with my next question, I'm actually going to I'm going to preface it for our listeners, in that before inviting you onto the podcast today, I sent you the questions, and I know there wasn't a lot of time, and so like with this next question, I didn't want to put you on the spot,
yeah.
but I think you'll be fine anyway, and so I'm interested to know, is there a philosophy behind your work?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that there definitely has been an evolving philosophy, I would say. Um, and almost, I guess, for all of us as individuals, like we go through different like journeys and different points in our life where, for whatever reason, there's moments where we're challenged. So as mentioned, growing up, a lot of my kind of motivations were around seeing some of the kind of social challenges in the areas that I grew up in seeing friends at school who were involved in all sorts of different things, asking some of those questions around the sort of society we were living in. And because I guess the thing that I saw directly around me, the thing that I thought could impact change was politics. Like I was really interested in politics and wanting to kind of do things through politics. But then as I've kind of grown older, some of that has kind of changed and shifted. Where I wouldn't say I kind of see that necessarily now as a calling. So I say the greatest philosophy or the greatest thing that I think now unites a lot of what I'm working on is the idea of trying to build wisdom and to kind of create spaces across difference. I kind of have this thing where I talk about wanting to seek and build spaces for the soul, which I think if it was to summarize my philosophy, it probably would be that. So that sense of, and it goes back to that first question of who is Daniel Stone, what is the definition of who we are as individuals and as people. And I think for me, we have this kind of outer layer, this thing that's temporary, that's our skin, our gender, all these things that are temporary. But for me, there's something enduring that kind of lives within us, and that is the really the essence of who we are. And so increasingly, I find myself drawn to spaces and to other people that speak to that part of ourselves. That say, how do we create spaces that allow that true essence of who we are to shine, to be refined, to grow, to really become the bright lights
Mm,
that we have the potential to be. And so that's really, I think, what's driving me is to how can we create spaces that allow that and that allow people to come together across difference so that we can learn from each other, grow in wisdom, and ultimately become kind of better people and souls.
wow. Yeah, I'm just gonna pause, um, just to take that in. I'm actually like snapping over here and giving a round of applause. I'm sure the listeners will be doing that. And so with what you've just described, it sounds and feels, on one hand, quite cerebral, and there's a lot of thought that's happening. And the types of spaces you have set up, it's looking after people, and not just on a physical, but also on a spiritual basis, like there's a lot of sharing. And I guess what I would like you to do now, just elaborate on your work.
Mm.
How does that materialize or physicalize in itself? And we've already spoken about a philosopher's yard, and your poetry as well. But yeah, if you want to talk more into your work and actually what you do. Mm.
Yeah. So I'd say definitely the philosopher's yard is definitely the thing at the moment that I think embodies what I've kind of outlined. I think our strapline is that we seek to create a neutral space for discussing life's big questions.
Mm.
And I think definitely that point on neutrality is that sense, almost that acknowledgement that wisdom exists in so many different places. I remember at the beginning of COVID actually doing quite a bit of reading into different philosophies, starting from ancient Egypt all the way through to then some of the kind of Greek philosophies that came afterwards and some of the more modern theories. And it was just really interesting how people were just grappling with the same sorts of questions. You know, what is it to be a good person? You know, what is it to be a righteous person? What are virtues? What's a meaningful life? All these sorts of questions that people have been grappling with for centuries, and I think are still seeking answers to now. Which is so just really fascinating, almost going through that and seeing how people were trying to really cope with and find answers to the same sorts of questions. And of course, in like today's modern society, there's no shortage of people who have answers. Like you know, you scroll on, you know, social media, and like
Mm-hmm.
everyone has an answer as to what a good and meaningful life is. But equally, like in religions, in universities. There's so many different schools of thought that are designed to try to help people navigate life. And so it kind of felt as if there weren't many places that allow people to come together and to explore this thing across differences in culture and religion and backgrounds. And so actually the reason why we called it the philosopher's yard is because the kind of literal meaning of the word philosopher is just someone who loves wisdom. And
Mm,
so the idea of this being a place where, regardless of, you know, your creed, color, whatever, if you were just committed to learning and learning from each other and seeking to critique yourself and growing wisdom, and then this is really a place for you. So it has been a real pleasure to kind of see already in a short space of time the kind of community that has been formed through it. So we had our first event just over a year ago now, and I remember that actually even in the process of trying to develop this as an initiative, probably learning the mistakes from when I was slightly younger in terms of I remembered having events in the past or
mhm,
ideas in the past where I kind of gone off on my own and tried to create and make it happen. Whereas with this, you know, when I had an event, I'm sorry, when I had an idea and I thought, you know, this is something I want to do, I remembered, you know, putting something on social media and saying, you know, this is the idea I've had. Who would be interested in helping to kind of
mm,
craft this and shape this with me? And so I then kind of had a small team who came together and we then planned it out, helped to refine some of the vision and how we were positioning it. And then we were able to launch. And so we now had over, I think we've probably got to our 10th event now,
wow.
covering things such as, you know, individualism and collectivism and consciousness and love and legacy. And we had an event on democracy just before the general election. And the general format, I think, reflects some of what I shared earlier, where so for example, in the topic of love, we had an academic from the University of Leeds whose background is in things around sex and relationships. And so she introduced it from an academic perspective. And then we had somebody from the Birmingham Buddhist Center who was talking about, you know, the Buddha's perspective on love and what it means to kind of love not just human beings, but love creation in a more holistic sense. And so then you have two very different ways of
Mm,
seeing one particular question that then created a really rich environment for people to be able to learn from, and also a really open environment. And so that's definitely the heart. But as mentioned, it does also then have its root in some of the things I've been doing around spoken word, and in many ways, going to some of the spoken word events were a really important catalyst for the philosopher's yard because there's one event in particular I went to called Empower Poetry, which is based in Birmingham. And they also like had that same ethos of really creating an open,
mm,
warm, diverse space. And so you have people there from all sorts of different backgrounds going on stage, sharing their heart, sharing particular things that have happened, but in a very warm and kind of a collective environment. And so really going there, I remember kind of going. My friend invited me to an event, and just thinking, wow, this is such a great space. I want to write something for the next one. And at that stage, I'd never performed like a spoken word at all before in my life. But I remembered kind of leaving that and thinking, actually, I want to write something to then perform at the next one. And so I really enjoyed that process of, um, yeah, reflecting, coming up with the concepts, allowing that to then form and shape, and then performing it, and allowing then myself to feed off the energy of the crowd.
wow. Wow, thank you so much. Just for that insight, not only into the work that you do, how you do it. It's absolutely incredible. And I just want to say congratulations as well
Oh, thank you.
for building it to this point. I came to the Love event,
Mm.
yeah, with the Philosopher's Yard. And I loved it, you know,
Mm.
for a number of reasons. And yeah, it's just it really makes sense where your motivations come from, but seeing it manifest and seeing so many people actually taking part, it must be such a
Mm.
proud feeling for you.
Yeah, yeah. I think definitely. I think everything in life begins as an idea. Someone has a thought of doing X, Y, or Z, and it's always then that journey to then see the thing actually happen. And I think definitely, and especially when you're trying to do events or initiatives like such as this, where you are trying to create an environment where people feel able to be vulnerable and open, that there's no guarantee that you'll be able to do it. You can come up with the theory, you can kind of come up with a bit of a event plan, you can have a picture in your mind for how you think people might react, but then to see people actually come and feel that it's a space where they can be open and where they can learn and be vulnerable, I think has been, yeah, it's been a real pleasure. I think just to see the space that we've been able to create, even in quite a short space of time.
Yeah,
So yeah, they're definitely yeah, looking forward to seeing how we can continue to make it something that's of benefit to people and to the wider community in Birmingham.
amazing. And so with the type of work that Strawberry Words does, just engaging with clients and organisations throughout the UK on anti-racism matters and consultations. I wanted to bring our conversation now onto the diversity and race. And not so much to put a focus on it, but I'm just interested in where you where you are now, what your journey had to navigate and what that meant. So my question to you right now
Mm.
is, how have you navigated diversity discourses and diversity politics in your life and career? It's a big
Mm.
question.
It's a big question. No, yeah, it's a big question. It's an important question. And again, when I think about the different stages of my life, I can definitely see how that has shown itself in different ways. So obviously, I grew up in kind of Handsworth in Birmingham, which is a very super diverse part of the
Mm,
country,
yeah.
where there's people there from all sorts of different backgrounds, cultures, and so yeah, and I guess we can't ignore the fact that even in environments like that, there are like important diversity discourses that need to happen.
Mm,
So, there's that thing where, at primary school or secondary school, there is that sense of diversity and mixing with people from different backgrounds. But then kind of once you start putting in other things into the equation, such as, marriage or other things, then suddenly there's a huge blocker to then that perception of this is a very mixed multicultural, that there's
right.
also very, very deep divisions within it.
I know you're really enjoying the episode, but I want to quickly tell you about our DEI document review service. This is where we will analyse up to 7 documents of up to 10,000 words within a day, based on your organisation. So that could be your EDI policy, it could be your website, it could be some of your comms, it could be job descriptions and so on. We will check for inclusivity, okay? Is it reaching a wide range of people? Are there terms that are non-inclusive? Is it up to date with its language? Are there any gaps for litigation? Is your organisation at risk? We'll do all of that for your organisation in a day. Write a report, do a SWOT analysis, and we'll make recommendations. The cost of this is £450 plus VAT currently. So if you want to know more, visit our website at strawberrywords.co.uk. Now back to the episode.
So I think we can't ignore the fact that you know, a lot of people are still very tribal. Like even if they are themselves a kind of minority, and often I guess some of that behavior was born in the fact that, you know, when you come to a new country and you don't know anyone else, then you have to then rely on people who probably look like you and present like you in the beginning. So I guess so I'll put that as a preface to kind of say that was the environment in which I was like born in. And then I remember then going to Oxford for university, and that really then being the first time that I remembered really seeing huge difference, both in terms of your race and not there not being many people who kind of looked like me. But I think for me, probably most importantly was class as well. So the fact that, you know, class just was a thing that was like theory when I was younger, and then you go to Oxford and you see actually there are people who are a completely different class, and you see what that means in terms of wealth and their experience of life. So I remembered at university being quite clear that I wanted to use some of the time that I had there to try to make a difference in both aspects. So both thinking around how do I help people from similar backgrounds to me to realize that Oxford can be for them too, and help to kind of get into Oxford through access schemes to university, but then also to kind of help to the university to rethink some of its approaches to inclusivity and race. So I remembered being chair of a campaign for racial awareness and equality, and we kind of did something called the 100 Voices report, which was seeking to effectively unearth the experience of minority ethnic students, so that they could kind of get a sense of of actually their lived experience in Oxford. And I remembered we kind of produced a report, brought it to the vice chancellor at the time, who was in charge of equality issues, and he began the meeting by saying, you know, there's no racism in Oxford. And we were like,
oh wow,
interesting, because we have a report that suggests otherwise. So that was definitely so that was definitely a bit of a crash course into some of the challenges at an institutional level when you even try to bring experiences to people that are outside of their lived experience and their natural reaction to be defensive or not to accept or not to be able to empathize with the fact that there will be people who will have a completely different lived experience. And in many ways, I always see race as being one of because I guess with many other identifiers, there isn't that same visual cue to kind of suggest difference. So you know,
right,
when I go on holidays with friends from university, you know, people in France or Croatia or whatever are looking at them and you know don't really have a sense of whether they're local or whatever. Whereas I look at me and already know and immediately able to tell, yeah, he's different. He's not from
yeah,
here. And so I think there is that thing where that then can bring out then the worst in people in terms of their fears and prejudices, in a way that needs to be acknowledged. So to get back to your question, I think definitely I've seen myself go through periods in the sorts of both as a student and also following that in the work environment where I've actively wanted to be a voice that was seeking to highlight issues around racial injustice and seeking to change them. I think, to be completely honest, it feels like at times that I have got a bit tired of it. I think there is a sense of, you know, constantly having these conversations without there being, you know, the change that's hoped for. I think there probably is also, you know, as part of the wider piece that I'm doing, like, and I guess I mentioned earlier that desire to think about actually who are we as people beyond this outer layer, to then kind of think through are all the messages that we talk about when it comes to race helpful? So for example, sometimes you get people, as soon as there's a black politician elected to a senior role, kind of saying, well, actually, the politician might not be the only example, but as soon as there's a black person put into a certain position of power, there's then that immediate sense that that's a positive thing without really even asking, what's their character? Are they actually good at their job? There's almost that sense of the outer experience being the most important thing instead of things like character and competence and all these sorts of things that for me should be like primary. So I kind of say that to say that there probably is that now added complexity that asks the question, how are these discourses, how are our actions creating the sort of world that we want to see? And of course, there is still a need to kind of fight against racism, injustice, all these things. But I think that there's also an opportunity for us to kind of recreate the sorts of environments that we want to see and be part of as well.
Wow, yeah, thank you so much for that. And you brought up so many key factors, and class being a huge one as well, especially when that as an example and many other elements to diversity and how race as something which is politicized, and when it goes from being a theory into something really within your vicinity and something that is so clearly identified. And I want to say, Daniel, and the listeners can't experience this, but I really like the way that you look when you ponder. You get into the stature, like you lean back, your chair's all bouncy. It's almost like you're nodding, like your whole body. And at that point, I know you're about to say something very, very that's just a tangent right there. So I'm actually coming to my last question, and I think you've already started to talk on this. And so within your work and just thinking about wider as well into what it is that you are actually contributing to as far as our society, what is it that you are looking forward to or hoping for in the future within the industry that you work in, or within your networks,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think we live in a very interesting world. And yeah, you can probably see me leaning way back in my, my chair. And it's partly because I think, we live in a very interesting world when we think about a lot of the kind of issues and challenges and opportunities we face, both in terms of the sort of society that we want to be. Of course, we've got the huge, impending doom of like the climate crisis and, the fact that we're kind of almost, driving towards a cliff and with no thoughts of even kind of tapping on the brake at the moment. So I guess you have all of these big, like mega trends that I think are creating a lot of cause for concern in terms of what the potential future might look like. And I think it's easy to lose a bit of hope, I think, with that in mind. And also with the sense that, the reality that we're only here for a certain lifetime, a kind of drop in like the ocean of eternity. So I think I say that to say that I approach future goals and ambition with a certain degree of humility when I think about both like my job, my task, my work as an individual, and also kind of those bigger questions of even if there are minor shifts in certain industry positions, what is the actual impacts on some of those bigger things? And so to answer both of those two questions, so for me as an individual, I think for me, the greatest responsibility that I have is to my soul and my kind of well-being, which I kind of see as being primary. And I think there's that. So for me, that plans out in terms of the decisions that I make around career, around the things that I choose to invest time and energy to. Is it stuff that's really allowing me to shine, or is it stuff that's dimming my spirit? And I think that's definitely a really important question that I always ask. And within that scope of things that allow me to shine, I think definitely things like the philosopher's yard that are aligned with my values and the things that I think are really important about the world and the sort of world that we want to create. So I'm at the stage now where I'm at a position where it feels like I understand myself, and so then the responsibility I have is to make decisions and live my life in a way that's aligned with that, and that allows me then to be able to uh to shine and to really do things that for me bring me energy and joy. And then I think for the industry that I work in, so my actual job is that I'm a program manager, which is kind of linked to my actual degree in economics. And then and then I think in terms of then in terms of the kind of wider question then on the industry that I'm from, which actually is probably then more closely related to my actual degree background, which was in economics. So I'm a program manager. So I've worked in different levels of government. So for the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, and now currently for the West Midlands Combined Authority. So I think definitely when I think about the future of the industry that I'm in, given that we have responsibility for creating policy, so thinking through what are the ideas that we think could really make a difference in individuals' lives, in communities, in some of the bigger challenges we face around kind of climate change and finding a better form of balance within life. I feel like there's definitely a hope that we can do that better. And I think, and especially working for the West Midlands Combined Authority, where we have a commitment to inclusive growth, which kind of thinks to, okay, we know that growth is important, but actually, what are the other impacts that we'll have if we just target growth, and how can we ensure that in doing that we bring people along from different communities and do this in a more inclusive and productive way. And so I think there's definitely an opportunity when I think about the future of policymakers and government to kind of find a better equilibrium of trying to meet these different needs and demands. I think that there is an opportunity to really create a future that we can be proud of, that is more reflective of difference, but it also helps to rebalance things in a way that allows people to live lives that are more fulfilling and ultimately happy.
Yeah, I mean, you've just made me feel quite optimistic and patient as well about the future, and just the time we need to allow ourselves to process. You reminded me a little bit about forgiveness. I wonder if there's a little bit of forgiving and practicing forgiveness within our industries where we have impact, or people who have impact. But then I guess the other side of that is accountability as well. But I really enjoyed that the picture, I guess, that you sort of painted, especially within the industry and world of thought and thinking, and many spaces which really impact a lot of communities.
And I think you're right. And I think often, when we think about things like organizations, businesses, then they do have this kind of like veneer of being something that's not human. But I think everything really that's being created like in this world kind of has its starting point with, as I said earlier, with an idea that somebody had, and then that's then created this thing. So I do definitely think that having spaces where at all different levels of society where we can just think, just take a step back for a second and just think, are we comfortable with the direction that this is going to take us in as an organization, as a society? Because often the worst thing is that people are just constantly running. They're constantly running for more growth, more income, more this, more that. And it definitely feels like, younger generations now who are asking that question. They're like, actually, do I want this job that's going to require me to work, X hours per day in order to get this? Or actually, do I want to have a slightly better work-life balance? And often people have reached that because they have taken the time to take a step back and ask themselves all those questions rather than just diving in head first. And so I think definitely, creating those spaces, but even for us, importantly, just as individuals, to kind of carve that time out in our own daily lives to be able to ask ourselves those questions, or just to sit with ourselves. And I know that that's why things like meditation practices like that are growing in popularity, because they're forcing people to kind of slow down a bit and just breathe and take time. And I think those practices, are so important to us being able to look at ourselves and look at our world through new eyes.
Well, I think this episode of Compassionate Cultures will be quite a meditative episode for many people. You've dropped so many gems and wisdoms, and I've taken so much from this conversation where I have been making notes. But I think to end, I'm going to go back to the beginning and moving on. I'm going to think about the dictionary definition of Sipho and see what that says there about me. But Daniel, I just want to thank you so much for your time and for sharing your thinking as well. Is there anything else that you would like to share to the Compassionate Cultures audience, including where can we find out more about you, and if there's anything else coming up with Philosopher's Yard?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'll start this by saying, likewise, it's been my pleasure to be invited on and to have the chance to share and talk. I think these spaces are just so incredible, just to kind of have a chance to kind of share in more depth our own experience of life. So thank you for creating this platform and for allowing me to be part of it. In terms of where you can find out more about me, I think Instagram is probably your best shout. So I am Daniel Stone, author, on Instagram. You can also find the Philosopher's Yard on Instagram. I think we also are on TikTok, I believe. And also our website, www.thephilosophers.com, has more information about our past and upcoming events, and the gallery with some of our recordings from past talks as well. So please do check that out if interested.
Wonderful. And I'll also say that you also have a very impressive LinkedIn as well. So I'll definitely say for people to check you out there.
Thank you.
Daniel, thank you again.
Thank you.